Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 55th episode of Podcast Demastered. I'm Chelsea, and I'm here with Wade. Oh my gosh. I feel like this is the episode we have been waiting to talk about.
We are buzzing.
Yes.
We're so excited. We've been wanting to do this episode for,
since we started the podcast.
Ever? Since we started the podcast, yeah.
Yes. So we are going to talk about the one, the only, Hayao Miyazaki. And just talk about who he is. If you've never heard of him, we're going to talk about his films, some of our favorites, what we like about his films. So for those who may not know, Hayao Miyazaki, he is basically an animator, director, producer, screenwriter, and manga artist. He was born January 5th, 1941 in Japan, and he got his start in animation right after college. He worked for a variety of studios, working on movies and TV shows, until he finally got the chance to actually work on his own feature. And his first feature film, I also am not sure how many people have actually seen this movie, but I mean, I feel like it has gotten a little more popular due to the accessibility of the film. But that film, and that he actually, so his first film he directed was in 1979, and it was called The Castle of Cagliostro. And then right after he made that film, he ended up co-founding what many people probably know the studio that he works for now is Studio Ghibli, and co-founded that in 1985, which the other big director from the studio is also Takahata, who has, maybe we'll have an episode dedicated to him at some point and all of his wonderful films.
Yeah, he deserves one all his own. He's great too.
Yes. Well, maybe I should just kind of go down the list of all the films that Miyazaki has worked on, see if maybe our listeners are familiar with any of them before we start diving in and talking about them.
Oh yeah, I can. It's a big list
yes.
too. My goodness.
I think in total it's about 11 films.
Are you looking at his feature films, his big ones?
Yeah, all
gotcha.
The ones that he directed and he wrote. So besides his first one, the ones that he actually then made included Nausicaa, The Valley of the Wind, Castle in the Sky, My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's...
Totoro?
Yes, I love Totoro. Oh man. Kiki's Delivery Service, Porco Rosso, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, The Wind Rises, and he is currently working on a movie that we hope we can see in a couple years, which is currently titled How Do You Live?
Coming out of retirement last time.
Miyazaki is very famous for coming out of retirement and never really retiring.
Yes, he is. Yeah, but he's pretty sure that this is the last one. He unfortunately, he doesn't think he's going to live much longer. So he thinks this will be the last one. It's very dark, but
I mean, yeah, he's
like 81.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's 81, so. And
yeah.
He's made so many incredible films already, and it's just great. And I think we're very lucky to see another film coming from him too.
Well, and in the way that he does his work though too, they still hand draw everything. Every movie, frame by frame, and which is crazy because there's no American studios that do that anymore.
Mm-mm.
Not I don't think anyway, but Disney stopped doing that a long time ago.
Yeah, not very many bigger, well-known studios, do hand-drawn animation anymore. And that's what I was, going to mention that, just because we said animation, it is 2D style animation that is hand-drawn. And I am very partial to 2D animation. It's just, there's just something about that type of style and the hand-drawn animation, how much love and care is put into every frame. It's really noticeable, and it's really exciting to see, a bigger studio today still making films like that. Now, we've kind of talked a little bit about who Hayao Miyazaki is and everything, but we're about his films. What are his films about? We've listed all the films he's done, but I think it's almost kind of hard to summarize them in so few words because I feel like all of his films have something different to offer. There's really something for everyone.
That's lightly putting it too. I feel like like each movie is its own unique feeling, its own unique story. There's so much separate love that you can have for each of the movies like with Disney, it's really easy to just kind of like just kind of collapse Disney into this one thing and be like, yes, I love Disney.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, yes, I love Snow White. Yes, I love Sleeping Beauty and Toy Story and everything else. But with the Miyazaki films, it's like each one is its own separate thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you can still just say as a whole they're great. But yeah, there's just so many different things, yeah, that make each film good or each film really interesting. Now, I do think he does have some similar themes, or at least quite a few themes we see across his films. We see a lot of with like nature versus industrialism, a lot of environmentalism feelings. There's lots of war. He's really into airplanes because Miyazaki's father used to work and build airplanes. His fascination with airplanes stems from that. We also see a lot of just like childhood and growing up, love, friendship. Those are some of the broader things I think of when I think about his films.
No, you really hit the nail on the head there. I was going through my own list and I was like, oh, yep, mm-hmm.
Yep. Yes. And then there's also one thing that's really cool about his films is that he actually has a lot of female characters and like female leads, and they're strong, like well-rounded female characters.
It's actually, I feel it's pretty rare that you have a male lead in a Miyazaki film.
Yeah.
Like there's always like the secondary character, will be male.
It's kind of almost a co-lead. Yeah, co-lead.
Yeah, like a co-lead. But like the movie starts and oh, that's the girl. There she is. She's the main character.
Mm-hmm. But they're also very unique, cool in their own ways. And I think too, what I've noticed about watching Miyazaki's films over the years is that I know we've kind of talked about there's so many different films and it's hard to describe them. And like you really could like ideally simply describe each one of his films, but that's just not doing him justice. You could really like almost as I've gotten older and watched some of these movies, I'm like, there's a lot of depth to these movies. These characters are really complex. These stories have a lot going on. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the other big things about his movies is that besides having these well-rounded female characters, you also have other characters that are just very complex and just characters that are not just easily identifiable as either good or bad.
Right.
They're all a lot of morally gray.
Even like the bad guys, the people that you've been like taught to like fear throughout the movie. There's always the moment when like the main character like meets the villain or runs into the villain, or you realize, oh, that's that person. Mm-hmm. And then you realize almost like a split second later, like, well, they're not all that bad.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I understand them. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, I know, oh, that's why they're doing this. And immediately they become a friend.
Yes.
Half the time. They're not even like, well, you're still doing the wrong thing, and so I have to kind of like stay away from you. The main character is always just like, no, I'll help you. I understand you. I'll help you and make everything better. Like I can fix your situation. And usually in doing that and showing that kindness and that warmth, like the main character's problem usually gets fixed as well.
Yes. Very well said. Yeah.
And it's just like all of these things, like, because Disney can give you the warm fuzzies from time to time.
Yeah.
Like in most Disney movies are built off of a fairy tale or a story or something, and it's the same with Miyazaki films. Mm-hmm. So many of them they're based off of very old books or significant Japanese folktale and thing like that. But it's just the storytelling just works so much better, I feel, on the Miyazaki side than the Disney side. It's not like an act 1, 2, 3 kind of thing. Every single movie, it's it's like you said, it's a little more complex than that.
Yeah. And just they offer so much escapism. Not that like other films don't, but there's just something about these films that just capture your interest. They just draw you in. It's that like fantastical mixed with like the realistic settings. It's always just hard to put into words. It's just so
exciting. It is, but it's like it's a feeling though. Like you can, like, we're talking about this and I can just like by watching you I can tell though like what you're feeling, and I know that I'm feeling the same way about the escapism part, like the bathhouse in Spirited Away. Like,
oh my gosh,
you just want to go live there. The baths look so good. The food is surreal. Like, the
Oh
company
my
is just
gosh.
ridiculous, you know? Like,
Yes. Oh my gosh, you mentioning the food.
oh,
Anytime I see
the
food in any of his
food.
films, I'm just like, I have no idea what this is, but I want to eat this. It just looks so
Like,
good.
I see their thing, and I have that too, but that looks way better than mine.
Yeah.
Like, and there's times in, like, because, you know, people will be like, oh, the way, like, Disney makes food, it looks so good. Like, no. No, no.
No.
Miyazaki food is where it's
Yeah.
at.
Miyazaki helps welcome you to the table, inviting you to join in with the meal that you wish you can have. Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's almost like you can smell it sometimes too. Just the way it's
Oh my
animated,
god.
it's just that extra touch, the extra care put into those animations that just makes it more alive. The it just sucks you in even more into his worlds.
Now I'm hungry. Excellent. I'm just thinking about all the scenes. I'm just like, oh, I need those
Yeah.
things
I
right
was like,
now.
oh, it can't be helped. Yeah. Yeah, I just like this one scene that just popped into my head was from Ponyo, where she's obsessed with eating ham and just,
Yes, the ham.
yes,
The damn
it
ham.
looks great.
Or even like something so simple as like the breakfast scene in Howl's Moving Castle, where
Yes.
is it Sophie, I think, is trying to make eggs. She's like trying to make eggs, and like the bacon, she puts the bacon down on the skillet,
Yes.
and like Calcifer's underneath the skillet just like trying to like reach up and like grab the bacon out of the pan. Like, just like the thick slabs of bacon she sets down,
Yes.
and she cracks the eggs, and just the way they animated it, just oh god, it's just
Yes.
crazy.
Oh man. Yeah, I think we'll have to pause this podcast and go eat some food now.
Go grab a snack real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll just watch Sophie eat snacks for a while. That'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, and another thing, when you just think about the animation, like the scenery, the outdoors, the like vast
Oh,
landscapes.
nature has never looked better in an animated setting.
Yes.
And this is like old nature too, like 1988. Like, it's not even new animation. You can go back and watch any Nausicaa. Go watch Nausicaa from
Yeah.
1984, and you're just blown away by like the world that they present to you.
And it's what I love too. It's like you can almost just pause any one of Miyazaki's films, and it's just almost like a beautiful painting to look at. You could just frame it and put it on your wall.
No, I want to do that. Thanks.
Yes, you're welcome. I want to do it. I've
Start
been thinking about it.
decorating like that.
I want a whole room covered in.
Just take when I picture like nature in Miyazaki, what I close my eyes and think about is like the small like hidden home in Howl's Moving Castle. There in the field of flowers next to the lake, the mountains in the background. Like, that's what I think. That's what I feel when I think of nature in Miyazaki,
Yeah.
which is also one of my favorite scenes, but whew,
Oh.
there's so much there.
Yeah. I mean, just any of the sceneries. Like when I think of things, I think of even like the forest and the evening in Princess Mononoke with like the kodamas and all of them just in the trees and this like glowing.
Yes,
Just
I forgot about the
rattling.
Kodamas.
Yes.
The little rat. I love their little
Rattles.
rattles.
I know. They're so weirdly cute.
They see in Miyazaki, like Disney, always has to have the cute little animal,
Yep.
companion. Miyazaki does that, but like he's weirder. It's not just like a chameleon.
No. Test BA.
Like he makes his own. Like the Kodamas, the dust mites.
Oh my gosh.
And Spirited Away, I freaking
Yes.
love the dust mites.
I love those. And they were like they eat like little bright little candies or something that they carry.
They eat the little star candies,
yes.
yeah, Kopato or something like that. I think that's what they're called. Which are they are quite good, so I understand why they like to eat them. But yeah,
Oh, just thinking of other scenes, like another scene that comes to mind just would be cool to hang up on the wall. It's just when in Spirited Away when they're on the train and they're just going through the water and it's like No Face and Chihiro on the train.
sitting side by side, yeah. Even that whole scene, just like there's no talking,
No.
they're just chilling. No Face is just following Chihiro around.
Yeah, it allows the scene to speak for itself. Yeah, you just get to enjoy the movie.
Yes. Well, and Miyazaki is not a stranger to that too, and just letting the setting and the characters speak like that, just letting things go, and just context, just watch. It's fine, just watch.
Yeah.
Not he doesn't do that constantly in every movie, but he knows when to use it. Like that scene specifically in Spirited Away, like you just had that huge scene where No Face was, like gluttonous and spewing all of his nonsense out everywhere and is trying to chase Chihiro down, and then he runs out of juice and is just there, and Chihiro is just
they're just
there,
like, chilling. Yeah.
and it's just quiet, and she realizes, well, he's not a threat. He's missing something, and he's just following me, so we'll just go from there. And it's just such a peaceful moment after that point. Not that you think you would have gotten there, considering what just happened before that scene, but...
Yeah. And that's something, too, that almost I feel like in all of his films, you can have these really crazy either action scenes or just chaotic scenes, and then you can just have still these moments of just peace, that you can really just take that time in the scenes.
Just take a breath.
Yes.
There's a lot of that, and it's an art, it's a tool. And it's just, it gives you peace within the movie. It gives you peace, like, in the moment, for the characters, for yourself, for the context, for everything. And sometimes it's just part of the story, just moving on.
Yep. And I think just, the way Miyazaki tells these stories and everything, it's just so beautiful just looking at it all, but also just having a very talented composer go alongside.
The music, man, the music. There is not a bad theme to go around in this entire studio. and it's hard to pinpoint, like, specifically what, like that, this here and that there, and this song, yeah, I love that song. Because like each movie is like, it's not like it doesn't go like from song to song. It's like the whole movie is one song. It just flows with what's happening, and it comes in when it needs to, and it's there in the background when it needs to be, and life is good.
Yeah, I just want to call it just so tranquil and magical.
No, Joe Hisaishi is just fantastic, actually, and like, as I'm a band person, it's what I teach, it's what I do with my life. And the composer of tons and tons of the Studio Ghibli films, Joe Hisaishi, like, he comes up even in, like, the band world too, which is crazy. Like, the first time somebody said his name when I was not expecting to have a Miyazaki conversation, I was taken back. I was like, excuse me? Like, do you know who that is? And they're like, oh yeah, he does like this, like, things that aren't Miyazaki related. And I'm like, well, I didn't know that. Like, and I go look it up, and I'm like, nope, there it is. Like, bam.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh. I mean,
right?
Yeah. It leaves you speechless.
Whew.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, like, emotion going on in this episode today. My goodness.
Yeah.
My goodness.
I know, but it's just great emotion to have, because it's just, I mean, I feel like what we're feeling, in this episode, for real, like we said, is just how you feel watching these movies.
Yeah. Yep. And there's the Miyazaki films, and then there's the whole studio films as a whole. And you're going to get the same feeling out of any of their films, more or less, except for one, except for Grave of the Fireflies. But that's a different conversation. That's a conversation for later.
Yes.
Like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
We're not ready to bring it down yet.
Oh, no. Yes, that'll be a whole episode.
Oh God.
We need some time to prepare for that.
Oh, I don't think I can be prepared. I've only seen that movie one time. And luckily I watched it at night by myself. It was an affair for me only, and I'm glad, because that movie broke me in ways that I didn't think, like, I still had in me, Yeah. And luckily my roommate came home shortly after it ended to, like, do like a life check because, man, it was bad. I mean, it's a good movie. I feel it's an important movie.
Yes.
But man, it's a hard movie.
It is, and I have lost count of how many times I have watched that film. So.
Oh my god. I am not envious. Like Brandon hasn't seen it, but I don't think I have it in me to watch it with him. But I don't think I could let him watch it by himself too, because it's a movie unlike anything I've ever seen, and I hope I don't like see another movie like it. In a way, like I mean, it's a beautiful movie, but it's sad. It's
completely heartbreaking. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it comes up in conversation, and I tell people, I'm like, well, it's not like a sad movie where like you have a happy basis, you know, or you get to know these characters and then something tragic happens. It's like, that was really sad. It's the first 60 seconds, like, you don't get a happy picture painted at all. And then after that first 60 seconds, everything is downhill. Straight downhill. Like, there's no jokes. There's no levity. There's no moment to breathe. There's nothing but awful real world, just tragedy every minute of the movie. Yeah. Until it ends. And you're just, like, broken.
Yeah, it's very powerful, very well done. Now, I guess it's kind of a good thing, I guess, in a way, even though it's such a great movie, but, like, Miyazaki doesn't have, I wouldn't say any of his films are just completely depressing. Because, like we've said, they all have those moments. They have your highs and lows. They're times to let you breathe and relax.
You know, the fun fact I told you about earlier, but told you I wouldn't share it with you. It's related to Grave of the Fireflies, but also related to Miyazaki. Because, you know, he didn't direct that one. He wasn't involved in that one. So when that movie came out in Japan, you know this? You know
yes,
where I'm
I
going
do,
with this?
But go for it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so it was released side by side with My Neighbor Totoro. And if you have seen both of these movies, or you have just seen My Neighbor Totoro, you'll understand maybe why they were released together. So it was a double feature. You would watch Grave of the Fireflies, and then you would watch My Neighbor Totoro. Specifically in that order. But the audience turnout was quite low to both of these movies. Because, like, the trailers and stuff for Grave of the Fireflies reflect what the movie is. And people were very, like, worried about going to watch this movie. You know, given the context of, you know, the movie. Which also means that Totoro's box office amount was also much lower than it should have been. But then, so they had their theatrical release. They left the theaters. And then the studio started releasing, you know, their plushes, their toys, their merchandise for Totoro. And the merchandising profit was enough to push Totoro way higher. So then they could, like, re-release Totoro by itself, and everybody could watch Totoro by itself. But I didn't know that they were, like, a package deal at that time, which explains a lot.
Yeah,
it explains so much.
It's so wild, but it's like, yeah, I guess you have to have those two types of films put together. I mean, in talking about it by saying that, you know, My Neighbor Totoro is very different from Grave of the Fireflies, I feel like My Neighbor Totoro is just a very heartwarming movie that just kind of makes you feel childlike in a way. It's just like you're experiencing their, like, curiosity and joy of these children just living their best life in the country.
Very, very important after the other film.
Yes.
When you have no sense of innocence or anything anymore. So something nice to pump you back up a little bit.
Yes. And yeah, I think Totoro, yes, is definitely the, like, iconic character I think a lot of people may associate with Miyazaki and the studio.
He's like the mascot basically of
Yes.
Ghibli, right?
Yeah. So it's just, maybe not everybody has seen the movie, but a lot of people I think are familiar.
They can
at least.
recognize
Yes.
Totoro.
I wish I had a stuffed animal of Totoro. I do not, but maybe one day.
I don't either.
Just that's one of the example of one of the very cute animals I feel like that comes from Miyazaki.
Oh my gosh, and there's so many.
Yes.
It's like everything all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in Totoro, you got Cat Bus too, so you know, flipping Cat Bus.
Honestly, that cat bus was a little creepy to me at times.
It was.
Uh-huh.
But Japan loved it, so.
Yep.
And we caught on eventually.
Yeah.
Took us some time, but we got there.
Well, speaking of kind of cute characters and stuff, I mean, probably not all the cute characters are necessarily your favorite, but what are some of your favorite characters or characters that come to mind when you think of Miyazaki's films?
So I had Totoro on the list, but I think that's low-hanging fruit. Like, you have to love Totoro. He's just Totoro.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the other characters I have Sophie, the main character from Howl's Moving Castle. In people who haven't seen Howl's Moving Castle but like frequent the internet, they would know who she is though because she's in lots of memes about like old people. So if you haven't seen Howl, Sophie, she's just a teenage girl, and she becomes cursed by a witch, into an old lady. And at that point on, she's kind of like, well, screw all this crap, I'm old. And
I love her old ladiness.
She turns into like the best old lady. Like she's like, I've lived a long life, I'm over this. It's like, girl, you're like 16.
She
but okay.
owns it, yeah.
And she's an old lady for a vast majority of the rest of the film, as she's dealing with all of Hal's nonsense and everything else. But so Sophie for sure. How about you? What's one of yours?
Well, since you mentioned Sophie, I'll just say I love the drama queen. I'm calling him a drama queen. Howl is also just
Howl
great.
is such a drama queen.
Yes.
He doesn't think he is, and then he becomes like emo of the century.
Yes.
You're like, good God Almighty.
Oh, but I love him though. I love both of them. They're both so different, just unique characters in that film.
Well, like together, like you put the two together, and it's just like she's got her old lady sass, and he's just like, whoa, 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 in his like weird gentleman.
It's like, I'm a child, yeah.
For real, I'm a man child. And she's just like,
Yeah.
dude, I'm 16 and gonna die in 3 days, so.
Yeah. I'm gonna put you in your place though.
Right?
Yeah.
I have another character from Howl, but let's get away from Howl for now.
Okay.
I like the dust mites from Spirited Away.
Yes. I love those things.
They're
so
not
cute.
really, they're not like really real characters, I guess, but they're there and I love them.
Oh,
so
I think that counts.
Excellent.
Well, it's funny. I have another one to go with yours from Spirited Away.
Oh, okay.
I do like No Face a lot, especially when No Face is a bit more chill.
When he's chill, he's fine.
Yeah.
And then he turns not chill.
And
Quite
then you're not my
terrifying,
favorite character
actually.
anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and to go along with Spirited Away, Yubaba, the old lady owner of the the bathhouse. I just talking about drama queen, but she's like a corporate, like cold-hearted woman, who just wants to take care of her baby, but she's in there like teaching Chihiro. She's like, no, you're a girl, you're gonna step up and you're gonna like be who you're gonna be, because we don't take crap from people. You 8-year-old girl, you. No, she's a great like, and she's like the villain, of that movie, but not really. Kind of, but not really, So you learn to love her. She's great.
Yeah. I was like, I still have a long list of characters I like. I think another one that comes to mind for me, which was probably one of my favorite characters, is actually Nausicaa. I just really liked her character. She's just very well-rounded. She's just cool. She's intelligent. She's tough. She's resilient. And she's also just so caring, too. She just has, like, and you see all that in her film. And it's just a character that you definitely root for the whole time, and just interesting to see where her character goes and her story. Because her story is, she's Nausicaa from Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind. It's just a huge epic. And I think that movie is honestly for people who are like almost into Dune or Star Wars. Like, it just has that type of vibe to it.
Oh, it does. It absolutely does.
So yeah, we have like My Neighbor Totoro over here, and then we have Nausicaa over here. Two completely different stories by the same director.
And you know, I'm looking at our list here. If you're a '90s kid, like we are, and you know you had Cartoon Network growing up, you probably saw Kiki's Delivery Service a couple times on Cartoon Network. You know, between that and Spirited Away, I think they played those two quite often, with a lot of Kiki going on. I mean, and that cat from Kiki, just I love it. I love it so much. But you know, so like Miyazaki's films, like they're out there. Like you probably noticed them a time or two. If you don't, if you have no idea what we're talking about, they've come across your field of vision a time or two in your life. I bet you just probably didn't know what they were. But anyway, talking about favorite characters, Ponyo from Ponyo, you know, little girl,
that
like
song,
the scene where she's like the song,
Yeah.
she's fantastic. I mean, she's a little baby girl, like she acts like a little baby girl, a wild baby girl, but a baby girl.
Yeah. Other characters that come to mind, I love both basically the co-leads in Princess Mononoke, where you have San and Ashitaka.
Oh, I forgot about those two.
Yeah, it's gonna take a completely different turn. We're getting to some darker vibes again.
That's definitely
compared to
one.
Yeah, a little bit more adult. The characters are a lot more older and mature than cute Ponyo. That movie, and is that the only one that's like technically rated PG-13 that's a Miyazaki movie, or is...
I'd imagine.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely one of the darker ones, definitely more of a kind of an action adventure. Definitely a lot more like sword fights and just more fighting in general, I feel like, than... Although, I mean, there's a mixture. I mean, you have like Porco Rosso, which is during World War I, so...
Well, you know, and that's Miyazaki's thing too. Like, you might have a movie that takes place in this fantastical fantasy world, and then you have darker films that are legit just like, no, like we're in World War I Japan and people are freaking dying, or World War II Japan. I mean, there's Grave of the Fireflies for you, you know. You know, he doesn't really pull any punches, but you know, he was born, you know, right there during World War II. So he has a lot of personal experience, unfortunately, to pull from on those kinds of fronts.
Yeah, and I think that what's also interesting, too, thinking of some of those war movies and stuff, or just even some of those movies that almost pull some realistic aspects, is that quite a few of the, like, fantasy-like elements of his films also have a lot of European influence. There is some, like, Italian vibes in Porco Rosso, and then you have... like Howl's Moving Castle, which is based on a book, which is written by a British author, and that is kind of...
It's very European, yeah. Like the architecture and stuff like that. Mannerisms, dress, things like that.
Yeah, so you see that through a lot of the films, too. That interest in the cool styles, and lots of the films have castles and stuff that are also inspired by a lot of European castles.
Like Castle in the Sky?
Yes. Yes.
Although that's not a very European one. That's like machine armies and something, some ancient thing. Castle in the Sky was my first movie I ever saw, Miyazaki film.
Oh, okay.
But I'm pretty sure I've only seen it the once, and that was like way back in middle school, I think. I don't remember a lot about that one. I love the theme song. I know that. But I don't remember a lot about that one. So many of these have such good theme songs that are so easy to remember.
Yeah. Okay, so you said that Castle in the Sky was the first Miyazaki film that you ever saw.
Mm-hmm.
I had to think about this because Princess Mononoke was actually the first one I watched, but I'm honestly not
Mm-hmm.
sure if the first time I watched it, if I actually watched the whole entire movie. Because I was over at one of my friends' houses and they had it on TV. And I remember sitting there watching, like, what in the world is this movie? It is so interesting. And I'm also not sure if I'm supposed to be watching this movie so young, but but I just really remember being captivated by that film. Because the other movie that popped in my head that I definitely remember watching around that time too was Kiki's Delivery Service. I watched that with my family, so.
Oh yeah. Like I've seen Kiki's Delivery Service so much because it was on Cartoon Network, and for the longest time I didn't even know it was like a Miyazaki movie because that was back when I didn't know that like Miyazaki was a thing. It wasn't
Yeah.
until like I saw Spirited Away. I had seen Laputa, Castle in the Sky, and then I saw Kiki's Delivery Service. Um, and then I saw Spirited Away, and it was then that I was like, this movie really reminds me of Kiki's Delivery Service. And one of my friends was like, well, yeah, because they have the same like studio. It's like the Japanese Disney. And I was like, well, that's really cool. And then when Howl's Moving Castle came out, that's when it really hit me, and I realized I was like, oh my god, like these things are similar because they are, because the same guy
Yeah.
does all of these. But then that's when I went and watched Nausicaa. Then I watched Princess Mononoke, and when Ponyo came out, I was like, yes, absolutely. Totoro. But I'm pretty sure I didn't watch Totoro until after I watched Grave of the Fireflies, and that wasn't until a junior year of college, I think. Pretty sure.
Yeah. No, that's funny you mentioned. Yeah, I feel like that's when I really started noticing what Miyazaki films were, and everything was also around when Howl's Moving Castle came out. And because that was a movie that there were people in high school that talked about this film, and I'm like, what? People
Yeah.
know about his films too? And oh, that's actually a Miyazaki film. I'm like, I've seen some of his other films. I'm like, that's really cool. I was like, I have to check that one out because apparently that's what people are talking about now, which is really cool. I think it's interesting too because what we kind of mentioned before is that I'm sure some people have heard of these movies, or you've at least heard at least, a couple of them. I think Disney did sign a distribution rights with
Yes.
Miyazaki so that they could have the films available in the US. And so because Disney's name was also attached to them, you got to have more, they were a little bit more widely available. And then we also got to see slowly some of them coming to theaters when they were actually released. Like The Wind Rises, when that came out, it did have a limited release, but I definitely remember seeing that movie in theaters and at least renting some of the other movies from video stores when those were around.
I had to do a lot. I had to do a lot of renting. Yeah, but did you get to watch like back in 2018 they did like a year long or summer long or something like that special presentation, like limited release presentation, where they would play like one Miyazaki movie a week or something like that. They went back and like went through like a huge amount of his catalog and played so many of these back in theaters. Did you get to do any of that?
No, I never went to any of those showings, but yeah, I definitely do remember seeing those, and I thought that was really neat. Because by
I
that
didn't
point,
get
I
to
did
watch
actually.
any.
Oh, yeah. By that point, I actually own most of them on DVD. So I just.
Well, that does change things, yeah. Well, and talk about getting these movies on DVD. Like, do you remember like what a pain in the ass that used to be?
Yep, and how
if you-
expensive they were to
If
get.
you could find them, they were like $30 minimum. If you could find them, like these were not movies you could just go to Walmart or Target or anything like that. Like now you can.
Yeah.
They have redistributed them, and they're like, I don't know, like $15. A lot of these movies now, like so much better than they used to be, and that's for like a Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Like a VHS or a DVD even, where they were like $30 a piece minimum if you could find them, like before Amazon and stuff existed.
Yeah, I do remember. I think Target was one of the first places that I remember seeing a lot more of them, but they had so few of them available. They just didn't have all of his films available, but I would see like one or two at a time. But they, yeah, like you said, they were still like
Mm-hmm.
$30+ for those
Yeah.
films.
We have just a cup. We have like one or two. There was a time of like, oh, I should just pick up every single one as they release when they were like $15 a piece, and I was like, no, I don't need to do that. And then I ended up like missing a bunch of like the ones that I really like.
Mm.
But now they are all on like pretty much every Ghibli project is available on HBO Max. So
Yes.
that's helpful. But if I ever got the chance to fill in my collection with the ones that I really like, I would absolutely do that in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I'm only missing one of his films, if I can remember off the top of my head,
Oh,
that I have on DVD. I don't think I actually own Kiki's Delivery Service.
that's tragic. Also, I can't believe that movie's older than me. That's crazy.
I can't believe how old most of these movies are. Yeah.
Well, like I remember when I watched Howl for the first time. Like it came out in 2004. But I remember when I saw it, I didn't like. I was like, this movie has to be like older than that, you know? Not because of the way
Mhm.
it looked or anything like this, like poor animation or anything. It's just like this movie just seems so like I don't know, like wise, you know? It's like
Mm.
this seems like a movie that has existed in the world for a long time already. But no, it was just a couple years old when I saw it. So it's so bizarre.
They have that like older yet timeless quality to them.
They do, yeah.
And also, when you mention HBO Max also does have two of the documentaries as well, if
Oh, do they?
anybody is interested in watching those.
Which ones do they have?
It's The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness, and it follows both Miyazaki and Takahata as they're working on The Wind Rises and the Tale of the Princess Kaguya. Yeah.
Mm. I bet those are good ones though.
Yeah, that one's a crazy one. It gives such an intimate look at their studio because it was amazing that they actually got people inside the studio just like basically following around Miyazaki personally to his house and even into the studio. His You get to watch his routine, watching him actually discuss the different scenes from the film and how he actually puts it all together. And I think one thing to mention related to that documentary is that Miyazaki doesn't flat out write a script or anything. It's more of just he like storyboards it and the story comes to him as he goes throughout the story.
What a creative way to do that. That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Flying by the seat of his pants.
Yeah. So everybody's like, well, what's the ending? And sometimes he's like, I don't know. Like he's just still working for it by it, like working scene by scene. That's just incredible to me. And that's just such talent too, that just be able to work in that almost linear way of making a film and then it just having such an incredible story. It's like with so many layers to it.
Hmm. That is bonkers, yeah.
So that's one of the documentaries. The other documentary is one that I don't think I've actually watched. It's called Never Ending Man, Hayao Miyazaki, and that basically follows him right after his one of his retirement announcements. And it's when he was doing early production on a short film, Boro the Caterpillar. And that's another thing Miyazaki has done too. He's worked on a lot of short films as well, and even a music video at one point.
Oh, did he really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it's called off the top of my head. It's like a girl that has wings, and it's a story about these like two guys, and they're in a. I remember I either saw it on YouTube or Vimeo. I'll have to remember what that one's called, or On Your Mark. Maybe it's something like that. So I think we kind of briefly touched upon our like favorite scenes, or at least we talked about some of them earlier. Are there any other scenes or moments that we missed that you want to highlight from his films?
I have two scenes that immediately came to mind. One from Spirited Away, one from Howl's Moving Castle. But like they're kind of spoilery though. So like if people are like enthused by our conversation, they want to go watch it. I'm afraid I would like ruin it for them, but it's the scene. Like, I'll try to be as vague as I can. The scene near the end of Spirited Away when Haku and Chihiro are falling, and like they start to remember and realize who each other are, and they're like falling outstretched with their hands holding each other, and that scene, like the way they're falling, the animation, like just what they're saying, it grabs me by the heart every time, because everything from there to the end is just like a big exciting moment. Like, it's just like a light switch flips, and we're like off to the races to the end of the movie, and it's crazy. And then the second one, similarly near the end of Howl's Moving Castle, when Sophie has Calcifer, and she's standing there with the transformed Howl, and she realizes like who Calcifer is. Like that scene is. We didn't talk about Calcifer at all. Oh my gosh.
No.
That's.
I feel like it's both one of our favorite characters. I feel like.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's hard not to like Calcifer. Like, it's just great. He's just like a little fire. Like, he's great.
Yep.
Until you realize who he is, or like what he is, and it's like, whoa, okay, that's crazy. But also not an important moment really. Like near the beginning of Howl, when Howl and Sophie kind of meet, and he's taking her home, and they're doing the like air stepping thing.
Oh, yes.
Where he's like holding her hands up above her head,
iconic.
And they're like prancing down on the air, and it's just like, he's like, you just have to walk. It's nothing. It's not a big deal. And she's just like, you're freaking crazy, man. Like, that's just like a frivolous one, but like it helps show the relaxed nature of like in the magic of the world and stuff like that. It's such a good time. How about you?
Yes. Well, I feel like I've already talked about quite a few of the ones I really enjoy. I think another one that does come to mind is in My Neighbor Totoro, when they're when like Totoro is waiting at like the bus stop in the rain. It's like,
aww.
They had that. Yeah. And the girls had the umbrella on them, and he has the little leaf hat. Yes. It's just
such a cute movie. The whole thing is just so cute.
Yeah. And then even just with like the mini like Totoro versions as they're like going through the grass or anything like that and hopping along. And when they're like a little bit smaller, they almost look like tiny little bunnies.
Oh, little baby Totoros are so cute.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I feel like I could talk for hours and hours about, there are so many wonderful scenes. And I mean, Miyazaki has a lot of movies, so it's just...
And there's no way to pick... It's so hard to pick favorite scenes, because you'll watch a movie and you'll find 5 new scenes. Mm-hmm. It's just... And those scenes will stick with you for days afterwards. You just like... You'll remember like the sunset, or maybe the landscape, or maybe it's the way the characters are looking at each other. It's always something different.
Yes.
And it's crazy how he has such a masterful control over those things. Like, that's there because he wanted it there. He knew what he wanted in those scenes, and it's just crazy. Well, it's hard to pick scenes, but Chelsea,
yes.
for the uninitiated, for the people who haven't really seen a lot, and maybe they're like, maybe I'd like to try it. What movie would you recommend they start with?
Now, this is a very tough question for me.
This is a tough question.
Yeah. Because we've already discussed how Miyazaki has just such a huge variety of films, and I definitely think there is something for everyone, and I may not know what the something is for that person. But I think in general, if I would just have to pick one film, I suppose I would actually go with Howl's Moving Castle.
You would go with Howl? That's crazy. Why Howl? Why specifically Howl? I'm a little surprised.
I know.
Pleasantly so, because I love Howl so much.
I mean, Miyazaki's films are always a little bit on the strange side, and this movie definitely has a lot of those stranger vibes, but I also feel like, I don't know if I would say it's more accessible in that way, because it starts with the ordinary and gets into the weird.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of starts with things like maybe people are a little more familiar with seeing, because you have that kind of like old style, like the town and with like the European vibe, and then you go out into the magic, and it's just,
That's fair.
that film.
Yeah.
It's also that is a very beautiful film with also very likable characters and some minor memorable characters. Like you have Turnip Head in the beginning, and then of course you have Calcifer.
I forgot about
And
Turnip Head.
oh my gosh, I love Turnip Head. And this movie too is interesting because you can watch this movie so many times. Like the first time you might watch and be like, whoa, I didn't see that part coming or anything. And then you watch it again and you can just watch how all these characters and all these elements really weave together to tell the story. And it's just one that I think is, that people I think would enjoy watching the first time, and I think they would give it a chance to watch it again and again. And so I feel like that's kind of, that's my pick. I would recommend Howl's Moving Castle.
Well, that makes me happy because that's my favorite. Howl is my favorite. So I, like, yes, everybody go watch Howl. If you haven't watched any movies, go watch Howl. I had to pick a movie, and I actually went with Spirited Away. But for some of the same reasons that Chelsea picked Howl, because it starts off pretty normal. And then the main character, Chihiro, literally moves into like a different world. So you're being introduced to all these crazy things at the same time as Chihiro is. But then like, oh, everything's actually pretty normal, which is very Miyazaki. But also because like, it seems to be the one that the most people have seen. Like it's the most mainstream one, I guess. At least from my perspective, like from what I've seen, I always see people talking about Spirited Away, or it's on TV more, or something like that than like most of the other movies. But like in that movie is also really easy to love too. It has a dragon in it too, so you know that's cool. But you know everybody really likes Spirited Away, but Howl to me is a little bit deeper. So if you think that you would like that more, Howl, absolutely Howl, and then go watch Spirited Away, and then go watch Totoro to get some cuteness in your life.
Yes, just watch them all.
Just watch them all.
But I think, yeah, with Spirited Away, which you mentioned that it's more mainstream, and I think that's true. I think definitely a lot of people might recognize that name more, and I think what also helped is that was the Miyazaki film that did win the Oscar for Best Animated Feature that year. Mm-hmm. So I think that definitely, I think also that elevated that film so it was even more easily accessible in the United States, that a lot more people saw it because they're like, oh, well, you know, it won the Oscars, so let's make sure it's available to the public after the Oscars. So
it's good enough for the Oscars. I guess it's good enough for me.
Yeah. But I'm like, well, definitely give a lot of his movies a chance, and you know, just because all of them didn't win Best Picture doesn't mean that they're not worthy of
it doesn't mean they didn't deserve to win it. So
yeah. So you mentioned that Howl's Moving Castle was your favorite film, and I know we kind of have talked about that a little bit. Is there anything else you want to add about why that one is your favorite?
Well, like the setting, I love the setting, the characters and like their relationships with each other. I love the moving castle. Like, I don't know why, but that aesthetic, I just really love that. And again, like my favorite landscape, like we were talking about scenes and portrait, like landscaping and stuff earlier. My favorite landscape is the scene where, you know, Sophie finds Howl's like little hidden away house by the lake and the field of flowers with the mountain in the background. You know, like I love that. I love that whole thing. And then the ending too is just so like, the ending is so sweet. And this is kind of similar. I like Howl's Moving Castle, love Howl's Moving Castle in a similar way to why I love Final Fantasy IX, because in both of them, the characters are very central to the plot of, not of the movie, because we're watching the movie, right? It has to be about them. But the problems in both Final Fantasy IX and the plot of Howl's Moving Castle are not, they're bigger than like the characters, you know, like in how you have like a whole war that's going on or getting ready to start. But it's because of those characters and their relationships with each other and the things that they go through together that give them the answers to solve the bigger problems at hand. And it's the same in Final Fantasy IX, where it's very character driven, the relationships, and it's those things that drive the major, much bigger plot along. Like the plot is related to the characters who are related to the plot. And that just kind of clicked for me just now. I was getting ready to explain how, and I was like, oh my god, that's just like Final Fantasy IX. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, great. There you go. I think that's why that's my favorite. Have you said what your favorite is yet?
No, I haven't. So I definitely really like Howl's Moving Castle, but I think my favorite Miyazaki film would have to be Princess Mononoke.
Oh, yes.
That movie just has so many layers to it too, and I think we've already talked about all these movies have a lot of layers, but it's just so interesting from like the first time I watched it of just being like an epic story with just very crazy creatures involved and just all the different like morally gray characters and what we talked about before about, you know, the so-called like villains almost working together or coming to a realization of helping out the main characters and stuff like that. And just that movie, it can almost be called ugly and beautiful at the same time. And that's just amazing to capture that art style, because I think I've mentioned, I'm not quite sure if, like we said, if this is the only PG-13 Miyazaki film. So this one is definitely a lot more violent. It's definitely a lot more bloody. But what's different than I feel like when I've watched some like anime shows and stuff where I just feel it's just like blood flowing everywhere. I'm like, why do people lose this much blood? Like, this is not humanly possible. And it's just there just for the effect. But with Princess Mononoke, that style, seeing the more graphic elements, helps to further enhance the story, and it's there for a reason.
It does, yeah. To push the point, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. To really push that point, because this is just a warning film in a sense too, because it really does with the whole like environmentalism, the whole like nature versus like the progress and the industrialism. You see those clashing, and just it's definitely one of those films where you think you figure out who the so-called villain is or something like right away, but then it keeps changing, and then you realize, you know, there's so many layers underneath here. These characters, these creatures have so much to them, and you just have so many interesting characters. Like that one, actually interesting enough, like you could say the main character is Ashitaka, who actually is male,
right?
So it's one of those
one of the rare ones.
Yeah, but then you have San, who shows up later, who in a sense then becomes more of like the co-protagonist in a way, but you get to learn more about her, and she's like freaking cool and really unique character, and has a completely different upbringing than Ashitaka does.
That's one way
but
to
how
put it, yeah.
Yes. And just, it's one of those films, where all the characters have to learn to work together and have to realize they have to meet in the middle in order for things to be better. And it's just a movie that just always makes me think about it more every time I watch it. And, you know, as we've said, you just notice something new every time you watch these films, and it's just, it's a good film, and it's just one I really enjoy, and I think in general it's one of my favorite animated movies of all time. So
It's absolutely up there. I mean, most of these movies on this list are they're priceless. That's what they are.
Yeah.
I would choose many of these movies over their Disney counterparts, even. Easily. Yeah. And if you've been listening to the podcast, yes, you know how much Chelsea and I love Disney movies.
Yes.
And you know, compared to Miyazaki films, the Disney films aren't always the favorite children. So
That's the truth. There's so many incredible films, and just because at least I'll speak for myself, just because I picked Princess Mononoke as my favorite, that doesn't mean that I don't love his other films.
Oh,
and it would be
course.
so hard. I'm not gonna put this on us. I'm not gonna have us rank the movies in our favorite order or anything like that. That's just,
there's no way.
No.
There's no
No.
way.
No, we'd be here for days trying to figure that out. It's just, there's just something to like about all of them. I feel like we've covered a lot talking about Miyazaki.
Yeah, take a
Do you
deep
think
breath and whew.
Yeah.
No, I think that we have covered a great deal. But what I'd like to hear from the viewers. I want to hear what their experiences are with Miyazaki, and I want to hear why their favorite is their favorite, and I want to hear them gush with us as well.
Yes.
Like the Miyazaki conversation is one that I can have 100 times over with 100 different people, and I would make 100 new friends in the process. So, so I don't know. I'm sure there's something that we didn't cover, something a favorite that we didn't mention, something. But I challenge our viewers to ask us about that so we can keep the conversation going.
Yes, please do. Yeah, and we'll be posting plenty of content on our social media, sharing our love for all these films. And so, yeah, please, start up a conversation with us. You know that we are on social medias. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at PodDemastered. Also, feel free to send us an email. We do actually regularly check our email, and we'll have a conversation with you that way if you want. Our email is demasteredpodcast@gmail.com. And if you really enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more of our thoughts on other various nerdy topics, or if you want us to talk about any other anime films or awesome directors in the future, please subscribe to our podcast and, leave us a review. That'd be really cool, and share it with your friends. So I think that'll do it for this week's episode, and thanks so much for everybody for listening, and we hope you tune into the next one.
See ya.
See ya.